Good evening, dear friends. I'm happy to welcome you from the Embassy of Finland in Moscow to this online session we have tonight. This is organized as part of the public program of the exhibition Together Noting, which is currently ongoing here in Moscow at the Museum of Modern Art at Yermolaivsky Perulok, still until the 30th of January. So if you're in Moscow, you still have time to see it. And in the last session we had before New Year, we had the pleasure to have Kati Kivinen from the Kiasma Museum in Helsinki to tell us about the history of contemporary art in Finland. And today we have the pleasure to have Miina Kaartinen from the Mustarinda Society to give us a lecture about the most topical theme, which is the ecological transformation of our society and the collaboration between artists, curators, and scientists. And Mustarinda is a community that is mostly working on a voluntary basis, and it has a residence in the region of Kainuu in Finland as well. I'm personally very excited to hear more. Just as a kind reminder, if you have any questions, please feel free to post them in the chat window in YouTube. And this broadcast is available in the English language or with a Russian interpretation. And both translations you can find from the Tube of Finland YouTube channel. Without further ado, I'm happy to give the floor to Miina Kaartinen.
Thank you, Jussi, and thank you for the invitation. It's really great to be part of this public series of public events, and congratulations for the exhibition. Unfortunately, I couldn't come there physically yet. I was already looking forward very much for this trip to the wonderful city of Moscow, but for now we need to be satisfied that we can come together in this virtual space. I want to thank the organizers so much, because we are living so difficult times, and I know by experience that organizing events, cultural events in these times is so stressful and so difficult. So that this is now happening, it's great and important, because it's so important that we come together to experience art and experience culture and to talk about these issues. It's so key for our survival also in these kind of times. My name is Miina, like Jussi said. I'm a researcher, and from my professional background, I'm also a social worker. In addition to these things, I work a lot in different kind of groups and associations in the civil society, especially in cultural field. And Mustarinda is one of these groups that I work in. I will today give a general introduction to the topics and themes that Mustarinda is working with. We were originally planning to talk together with my colleagues Kariranta, who is an artist, and we were planning to do more of a dialogue type of lecture to talk together as an artist and a researcher, but now you will have to do with me and my research point of view. I'm a cultural studies researcher. My point of view to these topics is a combination of humanist and social sciences viewpoints. Just to start from the very basic info about Mustarinda Association, who we are and what is all. We are a multidisciplinary group of people, but especially artists and cultural workers and researchers. And we share this goal of promoting ecological rebuilding of society, the diversity of culture and nature, and the connection between art and science. Mustarinda was founded in 2010, so over a decade ago. And one important thing that was motivating the founders was that during those times, the ecological questions and the climate crisis was not discussed in the art and cultural field almost at all. So the founders of Mustarinda felt that it is really time to start discussing about these things and what is the role of art in these times. Now, looking back, it's only 10 years, of course, it's a relatively short time, but society has already changed so much that it now feels kind of surprising that even so short time ago, these things were really marginal, because now they have come to the center of a lot of art and cultural discussions, at least in Finland and globally, I'm sure too. If we think about where we are now as an association and group after 10 years of work, it is, here is kind of like a organizational chart of everything what is happening. So it's a network and combination of many different kind of activities. But the center of the activities is the Mustarinda House, which is situated there in Kainuu area in Finland, in Paljakanvaara. It's a residency house that is built in ecological as possible, structurally speaking, and it has different kind of activities supporting those goals. But then we also have other things in addition to the residency that we can see in these smaller bubbles, such as these lectures that I'm giving now, different kind of courses, workshops, publication, and exhibitions that I will go more deeply into later. Mustarinda is a non-profit association, a lot based on volunteer work. Then we have a separate house group that takes care of the house activities. Mainly we are still working and volunteer based. And one important theme that we are investigating, especially these years, is how to promote even more and more collective ways of working. And that's why we originally wanted to give this lecture, but as a duo too, that we would really try always to think like how to do together things, because of course this kind of big system does not work without different kind of viewpoints and people collaborating, and also more than human collaborators are super important. The energy system, if we dive directly deeply into the house practicalities and the beginnings of Mustarinda, that the founders wanted to set up a space where it is possible to do art, do science, and discuss about making art and making science in a space that is built as energy efficient as possible. So we are experimenting, testing, and of course failing and trying again very many different kind of issues related to the energy system of the house. Here is a more detailed map of the house energy system, just to give you an idea of all the different things that are connected to running a big residency house. I think one very important point here is, for example, that we are able to use energy from the grid. It's relatively small amount when our overall consumption is so big. So we are using, or we have geothermal heating and solar energy, which are very important to the overall house energy system. And one point of this thinking about the energy system is thinking about how to live in a house to weather. So of course, when we are using renewable energy sources, it is always connected to the weather. And because of these weather conditions, we are constantly also not only adjusting our own everyday life in the house, but also the system. For example, this wood boiler that was connected to the energy system was done in 2018 when there was really severe power cuts in the area of Kainuu, where Mustarinda is situated. And these extreme conditions really made us test again like the best possible way to live, adjusting to the climate change, because of course the extreme weather conditions are connected to the changing climate. Here are some other pictures of the energy experiments. I am using this common slide presentation of our group because it has so nice pictures, and I hope to, with these pictures, bring you a little bit on a trip to Mustarinda to see what all is there. So I'm showing a lot of pictures tonight. Here is a wood gas car that was part of a more performative art event also, but energy experiment nevertheless. Just a picture of the boiler room, another kind of heart of the house, if kitchen is one too. This was a compost heater container that was testing how to use composting process to generate heat. And then finally, picture of the house there in Paljakanvaara in Kainuu. This was taken in 2018 in February, so it was exactly that spring when there was a lot of snow, had been snowing the whole changing of the year, but the ground on the forest had not frozen yet. So when the trees became really heavy because of the snow, they started collapsing on the power lines. So that's what caused the power cuts there. But we can see that there is a lot of snow. It's one of the snowiest places in Finland. So even in everyday life, weather is really present there, and it's a normal reaction to start thinking about weather when spending time in a place like this. But socially speaking, it's also interesting to think about the geographical location where Mustarinda is situated. So it is far from Helsinki, far from the cultural centers. We could also call Kainuu sort of like a cultural periphery. Of course, it's a value-giving term, but even there, if it's far from Helsinki, it's also very far from the closest village. So it's a remote place to work and live. We have few neighbors, but they are also far away, and of course, a little bit older people. Kainuu as an area is also that kind of place that people are moving away from there. The people living there are getting older. There are certain social problems that are different from other places of Finland. So it's quite interesting place to think about an ecological reconstruction or ecological transition also from the social viewpoint. And one important issue connected to this is that even if socially speaking, there is a lot of problems, at the same time, Kainuu is very rich from the natural resources. There are a lot of forests and a lot of wind now, big plans to build windmills, etc. Forestry use is big business. So it's a central place when we think about the energy transition in Finland. And the residency program is one of our main activities there in the house. It's going around the year, and I was just earlier telling Jussi that we have been able to continue even in these COVID times, but it has been, of course, a lot of work how to bring people from different places together, but luckily we have managed with the grit. It's one of the most popular residency programs in Finland, and the first one that really took ecological themes into the center of the residency program. We have always open call, so anyone can apply, and I of course recommend everyone to apply next time when we have this fall open call. Here I have then some pictures from inside the house. These are studio spaces. We have different size studios for different purposes. Of course, there are artists working from multiple different fields, so we can provide spaces for different kind of needs. And then bedrooms. Very cozy place to work. It's actually an old school building that was built in the 50s. And it was a school about 20 years, and then it has hosted different kind of communities, like a rehabilitation center for the youth and this kind of thing. So it's also nice how Mustarinda Association is continuing these different kind of communities coming together in this house with such a rich history. Here are some other events and activities that are taking place there in Kainuu. We have public events and collaborations with the local municipalities, for different kind of age group, organizing art and environmental education activities and events, cultural events. Now I show some pictures of these different events. Of course, trips to there's a nature trail that leaves quite close from the house or from the yard actually, that goes to this pristine old growth forest. So it's really amazing and inspiring resource for researchers or anyone really to go to this forest, which is so rare to find and to really see and be in the forest. And from these pictures, you can see that the nature, different elements of nature is always like so important key element or agent or actor in the activities of Mustarinda Association. This is a workshop from Leichenfest, which has been organized on few summers. I can imagine they are there lying and thinking with the lichen and learning with the lichen. This is a picture from the Mustarinda garden I think this was actually a celebration party of the association's 10-year anniversary. It's also important to celebrate among the hard work. This is a picture from Wood Opera, which was in August 2019. It was a huge contemporary opera production that was done together with the Latvian team of composers and musicians and architects. So it was an opera event in the forest. And 200 people took part on 2 nights. And it was free of charge for the people who took part. And it was very, I wasn't able to take part, but I've heard so amazing experiences from these events. This is from Meyer reception. It was a performative art event that was celebrating one particular local Meyer that was restored. And then another kind of event for local social work professionals. We had a day seminar speaking about different global social work and eco-social themes. And of course, important part of the activities has always been the exhibitions. since the beginning of Mustarinda, there has been summer exhibitions as part of the public program. So it's been an important way to invite people who are normally not able to come to the residency house, so then they can get to know the work through these exhibitions. And they have been inside the house, but the last two exhibitions have been on the trail and in the forest, so moving away from this idea of white cube art inside the building. This is from exhibition opening, a small space in the middle of the forest that is used for exhibitions, but also for working. An artwork from Edge Effects exhibition. And then one important part and dear to my heart as a researcher, of course, is the publication that Mustarinda has. It's a cultural magazine that connects art and science. For me, it has been very, as a junior researcher, when I, a few years back, was first time in Mustarinda, it has been since then a huge source of inspiration and a way to get to know these themes that Mustarinda is working with more on a deep level and on theoretical level. The publication is it's connecting art and science, so it is very crossing these different boundaries. And I think as a researcher that also this kind of publication work can be one way of putting your hands onto the change, like really showing another way how we can work towards connecting different kinds of themes. In this presentation, the last pictures are from the garden, which is one important part of Mustarinda activities there in the house. But also I like to think of the garden very on a symbolic level, because it's such a wonderful place to start thinking about your own, when you put your hands, those are actually my hands in the picture. My friend Mihaela took this picture when we were together in the house. So it's really that kind of place where you can start thinking about doing things together with nature, being there in the garden, like how the weather's changing, how your work affects what is happening, and also getting to know the local specialities of every garden is different, so you need to consider like what especially this garden needs. Here's an example of the garden map that is changing every year a little bit what we are growing. They're trying to test what is best, what works in these rough conditions. The summer is of course very long, but it's very short, but the days are very long, so there is a lot of lights. So you need to be very quick to start the garden in the spring, so you can get everything on the ground and growing as fast as possible. Just to end this general introduction to Mustarinda on a personal note, for me, through this garden work, like before, it has been really an eye-opening way to start thinking about social work also differently, or the cultural work that I do differently. And since working in the Mustarinda garden, I have been starting community garden also here in my hometown Lahti, and thinking about what it means to do social work in garden, what do we mean when we speak about things or people being social, who all is social, and what is it then to do social work. So this kind of idea, multi-species communities and more than human communities, they are really present in the garden, and it is example of how when you go do research in a place like Mustarinda, very different than doing research in the regular conventional places where we are used to work, in the offices, in universities, when you are not connected to the weather, when you don't have to follow the weather. But when you go to this kind of place, connecting more with what is happening on the surrounding nature, and then that starts to affect your thinking also. And I think that is the power of this kind of place and these kind of activities. They can be very subtle processes, but something happens when you do the regular thing that you do in different place, but when you change the context and you need to start considering different aspects of the surroundings, it can really make a big effect also on theoretical thinking. And I think that is one of the, when we named this lecture as this art of ecological reconstruction, that is exactly what we were meaning with this. If we think about art in a philosophical sense, not from institutional perspective, but art is something that we go towards the unknown, and we can combine elements that are not usually combined and do things differently. So these kind of things are very key things when we think about the ecological reconstruction, which I actually forgot to mention in the beginning, that where this term comes from. It's now in Finland, there is now a research unit called BIOS that has lots of members also from Mustarinda Association, and it's kind of started from the same group early days. And BIOS research unit has been theorizing and conceptualizing this ecological reconstruction term. And if we put it really shortly, they say that to phase out fossil fuel use, the material structures and social practices of production, transport, and housing must be reconstructed. They use the term reconstruction because it's a similar kind of processes that we had to as a society do after the war. So when we are living in the ruins, if we think that we are now living in the ruins of fossil fuel culture, then we need to reconstruct everything on a more sustainable level. So it means exactly a change in the relationship of nature and human, and natural and human systems. And though I was speaking a lot about energy in the beginning of the presentation and how key this energy transformation or transition is in the big social change, but it is so connected to the cultural change, which is an everyday change, and it's a change in the ways that we think about things, what we value, what we do. So as a social worker and cultural studies researchers, of course, I am so fascinated about this. What is the social and cultural dimension of the ecological reconstruction work that we are doing? And I would say that art is one of the key elements that we need in this change. I think this is a very good sentence to end my speech. I am willing to answer questions and maybe have a little bit of discussion together with you.
Thank you so much, Miina, for such an inspirational presentation. You know, as a person who's currently sitting in the center of Moscow and looking at the pictures from the summer garden in Finland, I almost feel this kind of a longing to visit the house. I see that so far there are no questions on the chat, but please feel free to share any if you have. I have a couple in mind that came during your presentation. Yeah, it was a surprise, to be honest, to hear when you said that 10 years ago, when the Mustarinda Society was founded, that ecological themes were not so much discussed in art. If you're now looking at the let's say Venice Biennale or the Helsinki Biennale that was organized this year, you could say that the ecological crisis is in the center of a lot of the art, of the contemporary art that we see now around the world, and it's at least indirectly being discussed in the exhibition of Finnish contemporary art as well that is ongoing in Moscow. So I wanted to ask you that do you see that the Mustarinda Society had a role in kind of bringing this theme to the mainstream in art in Finland, or do you see that this development has been happening organically?
Yes, thank you for a good question and good thoughts. Yes, I do believe that Mustarinda has had an important role in this process, at least in Finland. I think it's quite clear also because Mustarinda has been collaborating with we just ended a big collaboration project a little over a year ago with the biggest residency center in Finland, in Helsinki, HIAP. And in that big project, there was also another these art institutions that were learning from Mustarinda and discussing these themes with Mustarinda. So I think the association has made really big work because Mustarinda has been so active this also in different kind of forums, because it helps when it's this multidisciplinary work that you can talk about it in research forums and a little bit like very widely in the society, take part in the discussion. So I think that helps a lot. So I would say that Mustarinda has had a role, and there are always pioneer organizations that maybe start something, and then when it moves to the next level, then maybe we notice that only then that it is happening. But of course, it's wonderful to see the change and see the conversation growing, because it's so important conversation. And you can also see it very much, for example, in the topics of theses that art students and art education students do, for example, that it's really in that the younger generation of artists also want to discuss about and want to challenge the way things are doing or the way the world works now. But of course, we need to remember that discussing about it is not enough. It's important to discuss about things, but we really need structural change also in the art field, and somehow like people coming together and organizations coming together, and maybe to use that power to affect then other sides of society too, that it doesn't stay just on the symbolic and philosophical levels of thinking about multi-species communities or thinking about energy as an interesting idea, but actually like what needs to change on the very day-to-day level of energy use and these kind of things in the organization. So there's still plenty of work to do in different fields.
Okay. I see there's a question in the chat. Does Mustarinda have collaborations with art institutions or artists from other countries, or such as Russia or others?
Yes, there has been different kind of collaborations. At the moment, we don't have any big projects, but we have been, before we had this post-fossil transition project with the Helsinki residency organization, which was 3 years project. And then before that, there was a long project that it was called Frontiers in Retreat. It was a 5-year long project that was connecting different residencies that are kind of in this similar kind of frontier places, and that project was thinking what are exactly these situations and places, the specific meaning in this context to work in these places. So we are collaborating a lot, of course, also because that's Mustarinda work is still very project based, because the funding of art and culture is of course very, very limited, and especially if you work on a remote area. So collaboration is very important, but hopefully we would have more also to Russian's direction, because of course Kainuu is near or has a border with Russia, and this forest that the house is situated next to or in the middle to these big forest areas, they continue all the way to Russia. So I feel it would be very nice and important to continue collaboration to that direction too.
Sounds really exciting. And like I mentioned, everyone that I've been talking to here in Moscow about your work have been saying that I want to go there at least to visit. But I'm sure that there are institutions that could be interested as well. There's a next question. You mentioned that the work of Mustarinda is mostly volunteer-based. Is the reason for this decision, is it mainly financial, or is it just that people are so active and committed that they want to participate?
I think it's quite somehow like organic situation where we are at, that how it has happened like that. But of course it's a lack of resources, like there's not so many places where we could search for funding to do it as a day job. And then when people are coming together from different fields and everyone has their own professional backgrounds, so they also have their own work, and then how to do it so that we could combine all these different kind of things together. But of course, it's also a lot of volunteer work goes to the house, and the very practical like housekeeping work, which is really big and important part of the residency program, because you are facilitating the months that the other professionals are spending there in the house. So that is work that you need specific skills for and knowledge about Mustarinda, but of course not everyone can come there for a month to this place. People who are in certain phases of their career also who can do it, and maybe do it a little bit on the side as a volunteer work, and then need to find money for living from somewhere else. But of course we are all the time looking for funding and trying to find like more sustainable ways to keep everything happening, because of course volunteer work is not sustainable, unfortunately, when we have so big organization and so many activities that we are doing.
Yeah, I might continue from that. Do you have any kind of special requirements for your residents? I mean, the artists or researchers or scientists who are participating in your program. Let's say that there's an explosion in the boiler room. Do they have to be able to fix it, or is it mainly for the for the house staff?
The house staff will fix things, and they know how to take care of the house. So there are no this kind of requirements for the residency guests. It's very, people can focus on their own work there. But of course, we strongly encourage to take part to the housework also, and often it is nice and people want to do it, such as snow work, which there is a lot always during winter. So that is something that everyone can take part to, as garden work also. But connected to that, we don't have any requirements for the residents regarding to the themes that they are working either. Like, we want to bring together people from different backgrounds and with different interests, because also it wouldn't help to only bring together people who already know everything about these themes, or who are already so inside all these questions, especially now when they are trendy too. So we want to connect people from very different fields, and trying to also reach people with the open call, so that we would get very diverse groups always in the house. So I recommend everyone, if you are interested, to apply there to work.
So although the ecological transition is in the heart of the philosophy of Mustarinda, you don't require that in your applications. So the residents can work in a variety of fields or topics.
Yes, definitely. But of course, applying for the residency and then coming there, because the long travel, even if you come from Finland, so it does draw to the house people who are interested about these things and who want to get to know this specific place. So if someone doesn't have any interest on this topic, of course they don't have reason to come also. But I think even if people just are looking for a quiet place to work, or because not all residencies are open for cultural workers in general, or any kind of workers. Some residencies have more tight requirements for the artists. So of course it can then exactly start these processes in the mind and in the thinking, like when you come to this place, even if you were not interested about the topics before, then you start to connect dots and see how everything is connected to your own work also.
I wanted to ask you still about the relationship of the house to the surrounding community in Kainuu, because I know this has been discussed a lot in Russia related to art residencies, what kind of effect the residency itself or the work done at the residency could have on the surrounding community. And you mentioned that the location is rather isolated, so there are no immediate neighbors. But then I saw that there was the opera event in the forest, for example, which seemed to attract like local people to the audience, and you had a picture of a session of local social workers. So it would be interesting to hear what the kind of what's the attitude of local people towards your community and vice versa.
Yeah, thank you. It's very important question. I think I've been actually thinking about this a lot these days, writing one application more from a community work point of view, because when I don't come from art field, I look a little bit differently about what all is happening in the house, because there is even if they are small things for the locals, like having a small coffee get together, or like celebration of Kekri, or this kind of thing, that they can easily be called as community work also, or community organizing, because on this remote area there are so few resources or few organizations doing this kind of community work. I think Mustarinda has been, of course, our closest neighbors are our friends, and it's you have to know in a place like this, it's important, it's the only way to be there, to live together. But I think then when you go a little bit further away, then maybe it is a little bit difficult to understand what exactly is Mustarinda. But that's also a good thing when it's so many things that you can't really, it's just Mustarinda, you can't really say that it's this or it's that. So that's also one of the strengths of the place. In November, when we were awarded the state art prize last November, I was in the housekeeping, and we held a small celebration coffee for the locals. And during those days when it was a lot in the news and in the local newspaper written, I tried to and talked with the journalist that it is also a prize for whole Kainuu, because even if they are small events like the Wood Opera, well, that was bigger event, of course, but it's mainly people from Kainuu who come for our regular events. So it's really, it is work together with the community. And of course, one important point is that now when we have been there already over 10 years, so people can see that, okay, they didn't just come to like for a short time, like they are actually here. It takes a long time for people to hear really or understand what is happening in different kind of places. Like even in here in the city, if I organize something after, or we have a cinema club, for example, in 5 years, someone has not heard about it, this kind of thing. So it takes some time to that people hear and understand, but after a decade, then it's already a sign that maybe these are people who are here to stay, and this work is here to stay. So hopefully more and more we will collaborate with the community also on the structural level.
Sounds extremely exciting, and really hope that everyone one day has a chance to visit the house, or maybe to even spend a longer time there. I see there are no more questions at the chat. So Miina, I really would like to thank you for your time. It was very inspirational, and I'm looking forward to our future collaboration, and also want to thank everyone who joined tonight, and the broadcast will be available for later viewing on our YouTube channel as well.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.